Have you ever noticed that there's no more ancient empires? Not one. Think of the pharaohs of Egypt, that's long gone. The Babylonians, the Macedonians, the Romans, the Huns, all of them swept away. Yet, if you'd lived in those cultures a long time ago, you probably would have been just enamored by the vastness, the power, the greatness of these empires. And you probably never would have really thought, or at least day to day, been able to picture the end of that empire. You just think, hey, we're so big, so strong, so awesome that we'll endure forever. But really, with the exception of probably the Jews and Israel, I can't think of any ancient nation that exists any bit like they used to now. There's truly no real ancient civilizations. And I'll put the Jews over in their own category because they kind of maintain their theocratic structure from a long time, even though they lost Israel and they regained it back in the 40s. Regardless, there's no real ancient civilization still standing in the original form that they used to exist. And I mention all that just to kind of fast forward to right here in the United States. We're powerful, we're big, and we just probably never imagined that our nation could fall. But just a quick survey of history really does a lot of damage to that idea of, man, the good times aren't going to go on forever. And then all of a sudden, there is a day where one day your empire exists, your republic is strong, and the next day it's gone. And it actually doesn't erode like that. If you look at, but to the populace who thinks you're sitting secure, and then all of the sudden it's gone, or maybe gradually it slips away, which is really the case. You look at the Roman Empire and you're like, when did Rome fall? It's like, oh, well, sacked in 410 and then the 450s and then again in 470s. And it's just kind of hard to pin down exactly when Rome fell. Was it to the Goths or to the Vandals or to, you look at all these just different barbarian hordes sweeping through, and also just Rome falling within. And still there's others who would say, hey, Rome never really fell. It just kind of transformed, and the Caesar traded his scepter for a pope's hat and still Rome exists. And so it can be really tricky to figure out when the end of a civilization is, and it metamorphosizes into something else. And perhaps that's already happened with the United States. It's hard to be like, when is the paradigm shift? When is the foundational structure becomes so dramatically different that nation that you knew and loved, born 1776, perhaps it died years ago. The historians will tell us hundreds of years from now. And now what's happened is it's something else. Or maybe it's just a few years away. Or maybe it'll go on for another 100 years. I don't know. But what I do see is there's some certain similarities between where the United States is right now and the different ancient civilizations that were basically headed toward a cliff, a tipping point, where all of a sudden their nation is increasing, and then all of a sudden there's a plateau and then a decline, and there's certain markers, and I wrote them down, and I'd say Edward Gibbon and his work, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, really incredible work, and I'll take a few of his pointers that just really apply to the United States today, but I just want us ready. I want us realizing that, hey, good times aren't going to go on forever. You need to prepare, and I'm not suggesting that everyone, prepare for impending civil war coming tomorrow, or that we're even going to fall in our lifetime. Maybe, absolutely, and maybe not for a long time. But the point remains of just any knowledge of history, the house of cards does come toppling down. It always does. Make sure of this. It is a certainty. The United States will not always exist. Something else will take its place. And so I don't like that idea. It's not an attractive thought, but I don't want to have my head in the sand either. And I want to really be able to look at the historical markers so that, if you know history well enough, and I don't, I'm aspiring, I'm not no historian. I read a lot. I like to, ask historians questions and listen attentively. But if you understand history well enough, you can really be able to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your present, and hopefully be able to have some idea of picking up clues in the present so that you can predict the future. So anyway, I wrote down a few, and again, I'm a layman, so bear with me. I don't mean to set myself up as some subject matter expert on all things history and predictive stuff of the future. I'm just a guy musing, reading the writing on the wall, and wondering, dude, stuff doesn't look super great. So anyway, here's four things. One is growing social division marks the decline of a civilization. So you can look back at our Civil War, 1865, is when the Emancipation Proclamation at the end of the war was basically signed, or no, that was signed. Anyway, the end of the Civil War is 1865. Regardless, around that time point of like never in America's history were we as divided as that. We were literally killing each other, North versus South. And since that time, I mean, all kinds of just different divisions have happened in the United States, from civil rights and anyway, lots of different stuff. But since those times then, I mean, we're kind of at a really, really volatile point right now where leftists just think the people on the right, politically right, are just the devil, and vice versa. Dialogue is breaking down. People don't want to be friends. They can't even have conversations as we're just screaming racist and fascist and bigot and homophobe and all these things, name calling back and forth. And slowly what seems to have happened is we've stopped listening and stopped thinking. Each side, or not each side, I don't actually want to get in too much to the political spectrum in terms of choosing a side. All I need to do is point out the fact that communication seems to have broken down. People aren't listening. People aren't empathizing. We're just screaming, and nobody's really changing anyone's mind from one point to the other. It seems like there's such a breakdown we can't even communicate anymore. And education is certainly not helping with that, as it seems like higher education, academia, is really just becoming a piece in the propaganda machine. It seems to be making it worse, not better. So anyway, I'd cite growing social division. That's a really, really bad one. And we saw that in ancient Rome. We saw that as an empire would crumble from within, and then external forces would come about as well. So the biggest decay I feel as a nation is that which comes within. If war can actually be really unifying. If the country was, in terms of the last few decades, our country was never so rallied together as one whole as right after the towers fell. All of us were just, all up in arms, and we were united just temporarily as a country. And so war can do that. And I'm not saying, hey, well, let's go pick a fight or anything like that. I'm just saying that there was a moment glimpse of unification, but when the war is within, in our own minds and hearts, that's just division. There's not a battle to fight without. We're tearing each other apart. As a house divided against itself cannot stand. Abraham Lincoln said that. Jesus quoted him. Just kidding. It was backwards. But anyway, a house divided against itself cannot stand. The second point, so first is growing social division. The second thing is political corruption. Right now, it seems like it is how do you know a politician is lying? Oh, his lips are moving. And that's not all true, but there's, everyone would kind of snicker at that joke, and everyone's heard it. And I think there are some exceptions, some people who are forces for good in the political arena, but really, they are outnumbered, it seems, so greatly. I think the public opinion's trust in political figures is so exorbitantly low. So when they lie, it's not like, oh my God, they lied. It's like, yeah, they're politicians. What do you expect? And that piece right there is just shocking that we have, corruption, lying, all of this stuff is just so widespread. We're just kind of shrugging off of like, oh, well, that's what politicians do. That means we've completely lost faith in our political figures. We count on them being morally bankrupt. And so a second thing is political corruption, widespread, complete political corruption, and the, acceptance of that in a widespread social arena. The third is the uprooting of the moral fabric. As soon as your moral fabric, kind of the foundation everyone's sitting on, starts getting ripped up, your nation is about to fall. And it doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden your nation is gone. It just means it's absolutely about to metamorphosize itself. There's that word. I think I've used that twice. And man, that is a tongue twister. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. But anyway, we shift, we change into something completely different. We were one nation under God. We were endowed with certain unalienable rights by our Creator. We were essentially, though not necessarily a Christian nation, certainly based on the Bible. Even the deists in our Continental Congress would say, hey, there's as good a standard as any. Let's take notes from that. And so where you have some of the founders very Christian, you have other deistic, but still we were really at least deistic, but very, very Christian in some ways elsewhere. But now you look at somebody as a Christian in the political sphere in Hollywood. That's basically excommunication, it seems. I'll quiz people in terms of, of like how open is a public to Christianity right now. And maybe you're not Christian, and that's really besides the point. It seemed like people were a lot more Christian in the 18th century and 19th century, and now you look at Hollywood, you look at the media, you look at TV shows, and I'm like, give me one flattering example of a Christian. And they're typically all like Angela from The Office. They're hypocrites and stuck up and judgmental. And it's kind of like, man, that some of the Christians are sort of like the best people in the world I know. And some of them are terrible, but still, it's regardless of like, we have no good examples, none. And it seems like there's a war of propaganda where we're like, anyway, what I recognize is there is a fundamental shift. You say Muhammad in college, and that's fine. You say Gandhi, no sweat. Buddha, no problem. You say Jesus, and everyone freaks out. You can't say that. You can't use Bible and your references. And what I see is a real dramatic shift in our underpinning. What is morally right and what is morally wrong? And so, hey, what is marriage? What is, and who is that between? And anyway, what I say, and some people would be like, yeah, it's shifting and it's for better. And regardless, whether you think it's for better or for worse, all I need to point out is there is a framework. The thing that our morality was based on, it's changing. It's changed almost to a point where it's very, very hard to even recognize. The fourth thing is a weakening of its citizenry. This is the last point I'll say. Rome, as its knees continued to get weaker and weaker, it's built on a lot of slave labor. It's built on a lot of mercenaries, as Rome was pretty rich, ruled most of the world as we know it. So, anyway, they would count on barbarians. They would pay off to be able to protect them and whatnot, as the citizenry got more and more spoiled, talking about their feelings and living lavish lives. And, just anyway, I see that as well. I see everybody needs safe spaces now, and we're becoming more and more weakened. Everyone's talking about feelings and whatnot, and I'm not discounting the value of feelings and feeling safe and just whatnot like it. Just, I recognize, man, our great-grandparents would probably roll over in their graves at just how pathetic and entitled and generally weak their offspring are. I wonder if the blood of our fathers still runs through our veins. The fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers who fought revolutions, who died in trenches, who gave all, who got up before the sun, worked all day, never complained, supported their family, tried to love God, love their normal man. And today, fast forward, we are entertaining ourselves to death. I think we've never had it easier. And good times make soft men, and soft men make hard times, and hard times produce hard men, and then hard men make good times, and on goes that cycle. And it looks like we're at the end of that cycle, as good times have made a lot of pathetically weak men. Does the blood of our fathers still run through our veins? Like, I don't know. All I'm doing is reading the writing on the wall, and those four indices that I just listed already, it just looks like we are we are on very trepidatious ground. The ice is growing thin under us. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm not, building my underground bunker yet. Maybe I'm arming up it a little bit. But regardless of man, it doesn't bode well. Remember, a lot of it would be like, it'll go on forever. Quit being an alarmist. I'm like, no societies persist forever. There's certain earmarks that are always there. And I named 4 big ones, and it seems like those right now are in full swing and effect. Maybe it'd take a very, very long time for the United States to fall before all of a sudden some tipping point comes and it is no more. But who knows if historians, hundreds of years from now, we'll look back and say, yeah, really the United States as it was existed, it died in 2008 or 2010. And then it started shifting of it was laissez-faire and now it is socialistic. We traded our capitalism for socialism and our government became huge and bloated. And all of a sudden the Supreme Court, which was supposed to just arbitrate and not arbitrate, but just interpret the Constitution and give opinions, now it's become one of the most massive, powerful branches of government that can override the executive and the legislative branch. And all of a sudden, it's kind of like, wow, that's a lot of power. Where'd that come from? And just all these little shifts over time. I don't know. I really don't know. I do know the citizens of Rome thought that they dwelled in security, and what they didn't know is their empire had been declining and was almost washed away, and they never even knew it. Perhaps Rome fell, and it was truly gone, and people still thought it was existing, but historians would come back later and say, nah, it died before you even knew it. And so anyway, no nation really does sit secure. And I say this so that we can be involved in the political arena to some respect. I play a different game here on this channel. I'm not a real political animal. And I don't intend to be. This is about as close as I'll come. I'll look at the philosophical and theological presuppositions that all politics hang on. I'll attack that and try to be a just calm force for good, a little bit more open and whatnot. So can attract people to our way of thinking without being unnecessarily incendiary. And I'll let other people kind of fight those battles who are a little bit more suited for it. But I'll stay a little bit more in my lane. But regardless, I think we can't afford to be completely apolitical. You have to be at least looking at it now. If you love freedom and would like to extend that to the rest of the world in greater measure, then man, we can't afford to put our heads in the sand on that fight. And furthermore, of my own safety and my own family's preparation of there are certain earmarks of, I swore to defend the Constitution when I got in the military. First, Second Amendment's part of that. And I don't take that lightly, and I know many of you don't either. And so I am a constitutionalist. And I love my country. I love my country despite all of her faults. There's nowhere else I would rather be. And despite many folks that would say America's the worst and they're U.S. citizens, I'm like, great, go anywhere else. And then they won't because they know you've got it really, really good here. Kind of like there's no justice. I'm like, there's no justice anywhere in the world. Our courts are better than others. Our legal system, at least we have one. And yeah, everything's broken, but it seems like everyone's broken worse. I've lived overseas about, maybe about 6 years of my life in different countries abroad. And so I don't have my head in the sand. I travel constantly. And so I see what else is out there. Man, I love my country. There's also, it's funny, you look at, pay attention to folks who have come from different countries, who grew up in those different countries, and have come to appreciate what we've got here in the United States, what's special about the United States. And a lot of people who were born and raised in other countries and then come here, they're the fiercest U.S. patriots around. Now, of course, there's some others who are absolutely American bashing countries, but I'm just saying hey, man, I love my country despite her faults, and I'll fight for her. I love her. And so anyway, I don't know how I got on such a patriotic tirade. I guess because right now in the political arena, and just as propaganda is really amping up, there's nothing quite as American as hating America. And that's not okay. You sit under the shade of her protection, enjoying her benefits. Love your country, and to that end, make her better if you don't like her very much. Anyway, guys, John Lovell, Warrior Poet Society, train hard, train smart, and we'll see you next time.